welcome to What the Heck, your source for Warhammer Underworlds and under 30 great new cards for Stormsire's Cursebreakers. I'm your host, Davey, and with me, as always, I've got Phil. How are you doing, Phil?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good.
And back with us is a good friend of the show, Geoff Osbourne. Welcome, Geoff. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Always good to have you on. We're going to be talking about the new universals that came out in the Man Trappers and Wormspat decks today. Specifically, the universals. We'll come back around to the warbands themselves at a later date. But that's going to be our breakdown. We're going to be picking some of our favorites or some of the most conversation worthy in the deck, I should say, in the new releases. And that should put it in context for you. We're recording on the 3rd of February, so they're not actually even out yet, although they've been heavily previewed at this point. And if you want, I'll try to put some links to some of the reviews of these, which is a good time to shout out some community stuff. So John Wynn Reese and Aman, and also now Jonathan Davis have all done early on Well of Power, Hexes and Warbands, and Can You Roll a Crit? Not respectively. I've got them all out of order, but they all have. If you want to take a close look and get further opinions on those, you can go take a look there. Other community shout outs. We're going to be talking to Geoff, who'll give us a quick rundown at LVO. But speaking of LVO, just wanted to give a tip of the hat to Aman, who had a pretty spectacular showing at LVO. He won both of the grand skirmishes and made it to the Grand Clash final, only to come up just barely short there, which is a pretty unprecedented showing, I think, at an event like that. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, almost a hat trick. Yeah,
that is a level of consistency when you take it with his other Grand Clashes, which is pretty much unparalleled as far as I'm concerned, and it's very impressive. So hats off to him on. For community shoutouts, Tom Bond and Michael Carlin had their second episode of Chatting Crits. They've got one of the fellows from Ready for Action on there, and it's another excellent one. They're talking aggro there, which is particularly interesting to me. I really enjoyed listening to that. So definitely recommend you go check that out. They're having a limited run for their first season, so listen while you can. It's totally worth your time. Anybody else got any community shoutouts before we move on?
I think just kudos to Underworlds DB and also Deckers that have turned around all the cards that got previewed this week in record time. I think Underworlds DB won by maybe a day or two in the race for internet superiority, but overall, as we all try to start getting into deck building before the cards get here, it's extremely helpful when these web-based deck building sites kind of move so quickly from the card previews that GW gives us. So yeah, kudos to those two platforms.
Yeah, because as soon as we see the decks, the thing you want to do is start putting them, or as soon as you see the cards, the thing you want to do is start putting them into decks. And so you get itchy typing fingers until that's available. So
yeah,
appreciate their helping us out there. I guess one more thing that I wanted to hit was I don't know if you guys have heard of the Battle for Salvation released their
annual
undies.
Yeah.
that was pretty fun. I hope they do that again next year. And I'm a little jealous that we didn't think of that, but it was it's very much on brand for them, their style of presentation. So and a very modest length of an episode for any of us these days. So very listenable. I'd recommend you go check it out if you get a chance.
Yeah, it was very funny.
Yeah.
Kudos to the intro, like with the claps and everything. It was good.
Yeah,
it's good.
I now understand why it took a little longer to edit. It's been recorded for a little while, is what I'm told. But yeah, it was cool to hear. But with that, unless anyone's got something else, we'll go on to our what the heck is going on with you. I'll kick it off because mine is relatively brief. Geoff and I have been engineering a Profiteers deck, and really trying to fine tune it. It's feeling pretty good, and then I'm going on to lose in creative and novel ways against different people. So today I managed to take a big loss to Tommy Conboy when I accidentally left Thundrick in range of a Blightbane charge, who knocked me back into an edge and then collapsed. Took the one extra damage from that on me, and I lost Thundrick on the second activation of the entire game, which which makes it a pretty uphill battle for the rest of the game with Profiteers. So,
Blightbane he's the reach.
He does 3 damage. He only hits on 2 hammers, but it turns out if you've got sitting target in hand, to 3.
That's it.
Yeah, so mistakes were made, and I paid the price, but it's been feeling pretty good, and I'm leaning towards bringing them down to our next tournament at Cataclysm. So
nice.
We'll see. Which actually, as of the release of this, will have happened about 2 days ago. So I guess I'm not giving away any secrets, but Geoff, we're going to leave you for last because we'd like to hear a little bit about your LVO experience. Phil, what have you been up to?
So we just kicked off the 4th season of our local league. So that was pretty exciting. We had 8 players out on a Thursday. So
I think it might have even been 10.
Was it 10?
Yeah. There was Vince and Cam jetted out, and we still had enough for 4 games simultaneous. So
yeah, so
felt good.
Yeah, really getting a sizable community going here in our area, and that's feeling really good. Super excited for the 2 new warbands as well. I think a lot of people in our area are as well. So really looking forward to all of the things that will bring.
Right. Geoff, tell us a little bit about LVO. I know we're excited about the new warbands, but this predates them a little bit. But you got out to LVO. Is that a regular thing for you? And what'd you get to do when you?
Yeah, actually, it was my first time to LVO. Definitely not my first time to Vegas, but I was really excited. It's been on my bucket list of tournaments. I go to. I go to Adepticon, I go to Warzone Atlanta, the American Team Championships in the summer. So I do try to get out to these events. But LVO for the last 5, 6, whatever years, it's always escaped me. So I decided this year I was going to make the effort, make the pilgrimage. And I headed down there for the Grand Skirmishes and the Grand Clash. Before I get into this, I just want to give a big kudos to the TO who not only organized it single-handedly, he drove quite a ways to get there, but Best Coast pairings crashed on the Friday, and he did 37 or 40 pairings or 40 players, and he did it all by hand, glory differential, doing all the pairings, and we only ended up losing 1 round of the 8. So he was incredible. So kudos to him. His name's not coming to me right now, but I did want to give.
Is it David Cutts? Is that right?
That is it. Thank you very much for the reminder. So I ended up going down for the 2 Grand Skirmishes. They were on the Friday and the Saturday. The Grand Clash was on the Sunday. I feel like there was a bit of a mix-up on days. I think the Grand Clash might have been supposed to be on the Saturday, but once it was booked and everybody had made their plans to head down there, I don't think they wanted to make that change, and I think that was probably the better call in the end. But yeah, the Grand Skirmish, I had never done one. I wasn't too sure what to expect. It was 8 single rounds, so best of ones, and I kind of thought, oh, this feels a little gamey. I'm not too sure. Like I'm just going to, pull out a bad draw, and that's just going to be the game, and I'll take a loss. But when I got in there, I realized that that's the way it is for everybody. And it was kind of nice to see warbands that you might see do well in a best 2 to 3, maybe not doing so well in a best of 1. And so you kind of always felt like you were in it. Nobody finished the day, winning all of their games, although Amon was very close. But it also felt a little bit like speed dating, which was kind of fun. I got to sit across the table from 7 different people from different places in the world, and it was a lot more fun than I had anticipated, and it really kept the day relaxed and casual. It was a 40-minute game, and there was a 20-minute break in between, and yeah, it was a lot of fun, a lot of chatting. And there was Americans, Canadians, and there was actually a really big group from the UK that came over, and they posted on the Facebook group on their way that they were playing on the plane longboards, which I thought was just that's dedication right there. So, but it was nice. There was Amon, Jonathan Davis, Tony Fields, a lot of Canadians, and a lot of the people from the UK. So it was a good time. It was good to catch up with everybody. As you were mentioning, you and I were putting together a bit of a Thunderix deck that I will give you full credit for. I kind of was playing with Curse Breakers and a few other warbands, in the weeks leading up, and I just wasn't really feeling them. and you had suggested this Thundrix deck that was a little bit more control based, and with just a few reps the week or two before, I went down. I think I did pretty well. On day one, I ended up going 5-2. I even had to go through the gauntlet of Jonathan Davis, Tony Fields, Rob Howard from the UK, and even Derek, from Calgary, who was he on this podcast, or was it on Battle for
He made
Salvation?
it on to Battle for Salvation.
That's right. That's right. He must have drank 6 or 7 beers in that. He was quite the character. Him and I actually played in the very final round. He knocked me out of the top 4, but I did manage to stay in the top 8, which was great. Him and I had a great time, and I ended up earning the acrylic glory tokens, which is really what I wanted. That was my goal going down there, was try to get top 8, try to get those fancy acrylic glory tokens. So really happy.
That's
there.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I'm going to interject for just a second because I can hear him yelling at me from Canada. Mark Cooper is the one who slid me the original template for the Profiteers deck that you and I are now. I think I've got it as, so the U.S. Navy rates things as like Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3. So I've got it, I think in Underworld's DB, I've got it listed as Thundrix from Mark 4.1.
It's just the deck that keeps on giving. So no, yeah. Well, kudos to him then as well. So that I think they played really well. Playing a control type play style with Thundrix does catch people off guard a little bit because they're assuming you're going to be playing aggro. And in a best of one, it really worked out. There's a few times where I got long boarded. And I just kind of smiled a little inside, where they deployed at the back, and they gave me 3 objectives, and I was more than happy to sit on those 3 objectives until they realized it was too late. So that was a good deck design, and I had a good time with it. Sure. Day 2 went 4-3. I actually played a lot of the same people. Just I don't know if it was out of karma, but I had a lot of rematches with Davis and Rob from the UK, and they beat me this time. So I ended up, they were my big losses. I only ended up losing by a single glory in both those games, but I finished in the top 24. Didn't do better than day 1, but I was really happy with it. Overall, yeah, if you can make it out to the LVO, Adepticon, some of these big tournaments, it's just really, it's something else to be sitting in a room with people who you see on the Facebook groups all the time. They're community developers or community content creators. Everybody is just really excited about new warbands coming out. How did you build your deck? Great paint job, that sort of thing. So if you can get out to one of these like really big events, I would definitely encourage you to. I think the next one on my list is Adepticon. So I'm really looking forward to that.
We'll see you there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, all right. So thanks for the rundown. We're going to get into the main episode here. So we're going to be talking, again, to reiterate, we're talking about the universals that came out with Wormspat and the Man Trappers. And we're going to go objectives, gambits, and upgrades, and we'll each bring up some of the ones that we thought were particularly conversation worthy. Now, that may be because we think they're particularly powerful, because they may signal at something to come, because we think they're a trap, like they are not as good as they look, or whatever the case may be. But we kept it pretty open as far as the criteria for picking that. So, Phil, you want to kick us off here? You feel up for it?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
So I guess the thing that I noticed from looking at these objectives, and we kind of alluded to this already with our under 30 cards that are great for curse breakers, there's a lot of really easy objectives for spell casting. And one in particular that I thought was interesting was Arcane Arrest. Arcane Arrest is an objective where you have to this one is, it's somewhat situational, but I think it's going to start to become more common, where you just deal damage with a spell to any enemy, hunter, or quarry, and you score this immediately. Now, of course, there's the potential that you'll be facing a warband that doesn't have any hunters or quarries, and then this is kind of a dead card. But I think with the popularity of things like survival instincts already, that just makes you a quarry, as well as warbands like Hrothgorn, who are probably going to be popular, that make or that have 2 hunters already in their warband. That I don't think it's going to be that uncommon to see at least one hunter or quarry, and it's as simple as play a ploy where you have an innate focus and you just get a glory. And that seems really strong. And I was a little surprised to see something like this, because easy glory from spellcasting is already pretty good. So it was a direction that I was not expecting them to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially since this season has been so far so hunter and quarry oriented. I really thought that was the direction. I was thinking, geez, they might not even have any more casting related spells. And yeah, this has definitely been the release where they've kind of gone back to the season 2 niche.
Yeah, definitely a lot of stuff for Magic. How about you, Geoff? What's an objective that you thought was interesting?
On that same note, I was thinking Rising Power. It's a surge. It's a score immediately after a friendly fighter casts a spell, and you rolled 3 or more dice in the casting roll. So this also applies to, again, we keep going back to Curse Breakers, but when he shoots his spell action, if he has anything that's +1 dice or Potion of Rage or anything, he's rolled more than 3. And the interesting part about this one, and we'll have to fact check this later, is it doesn't say successful.
Right. Just have to roll the dice.
You just need to roll the dice. Yep. And being somebody who can't seem to roll dice very well sometimes, I think this card is almost broken. So I'm very interested to see them bring out a card like this. But that's why I've got it on my list. Rising Power.
Yeah. You know what I'm hearing right here is Thedra plus Arcane Savant.
Yeah.
Lock it in.
That's what I'm talking about.
Magic Godsworn. You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah. No. I think I have an Adepticon plan. I'm surprised they were with Godsworn last year. The only way to go is Magic Godsworn this year. Yeah, we'll see. For me, one of my picks was Adaptive Strategy. It will score in an end phase if you have scored 5 or more hybrid objective cards. And I was like, I really do kind of like some of the design space that the hybrid objectives have been sitting in, because you think about stuff like Hunt's End for Skate's Wild Hunt, where they can either have taken out a fighter with 4 wounds or otherwise it's like an hour only way out that is 2 glory for holding 3. Like, some of those are really occupy a cool space. And what I thought was crucial about this was that hybrid objective cards, if you build it right, theoretically the rest of your deck could be hybrid, because something could be surge and a hybrid, or it could be in hybrid end phase. So I was really excited about this. And then I did a search on Underworld's DB. I said, filter for objectives of any kind, show me hybrid, and all objectives, universal and faction specific. I think it came up with 10 total in the game right now. So
yeah,
not ready for prime time, but watch this space is my take on it. I think it has potential depending on what gets out. If you can really load up a hybrid deck, that'd be cool. So if a faction drops that has a bunch of hybrid objectives built in or something like that, that'll get exciting.
And Gathered Momentum is almost a must take or like an auto take in a lot of warbands, especially Wild Hunt, as you just mentioned. So yeah, there's some warbands that are really attuned for that.
Yeah. So I think a few more, a little bit more help here or there, and this might be a card to come back to. Geoff, let's come back around to you. Or we'll hit you again. What do you got?
Sounds good. You know what? I saw Perfect Match. Now, Perfect Match is 4 glory. Score this in an end phase if you had scored 10 or more objectives. And anything time I see 4 glory, I assume you'll never score it. And then 10 objectives, I'm like, yeah, okay, that sets up about right. But this is the biggest flaw I see in aggro warbands, is that they want to score really easy 1 glory score immediates, 1 glory end phase type cards, and they can go through their deck so quickly, but at the end of the day, their ceiling is so low. They only have 12 to 14 glory in their deck, where all of a sudden now you put in Perfect Match, and it's 4 glory. All of a sudden that can be that catch-up card. Maybe it's equivalent to, what was the one where if you scored Oh, I'm already
Scored
forgetting.
6. Yeah, Superior Tactician.
That's right, Superior
Yeah.
Tactician. It's almost like the Superior Tactician of the season 3, and I don't know if it's going to be a perfect match, pardon the pun, but I do think for some decks who want to move quickly, I think there's some Thundrix Profiteers decks that can just rifle through if they want to. I think this could be a really good fit, so I think it's an interesting card. I don't know if you'll see it everywhere, but it's definitely going to catch some people by surprise when they're up by 3 or 4, and perfect match comes down to win the game.
Mm-hmm. Phil, I think you had there's a good partner to this, so we can talk together. You had picked out aggressive strategy.
Yeah, so sort of actually, I think all 3 of the ones we just mentioned, including aggressive strategy, they all kind of fit this same design space of these end phase cards that are reliant on having scored other objectives. Aggressive strategy is the scored in an end phase if you have scored 5 or more surge objectives, and it's for 2. So very similar to adaptive strategy, but potentially more difficult because you do have to score 5 of 6 of your surge cards.
Mm-hmm.
However, like Geoff was mentioning, if you design your deck in such a way that all of your surges are super easy, which I think at this point most people are trying to go that route, this starts to feel like a round 2 or round 3 almost guaranteed 2 glory. It certainly seems better than Combo Strike in some decks. And if you get really crazy, you might even run both. Although that's asking for a bricked hand, I think.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it occupies a similar space where you can sort of snowball your deck here. And I think the interesting thing with Perfect Match is that Perfect Match is basically a third end phase objective, but it almost pairs well with any one of these other ones, because if you can score all of your hybrids or all of your surges and then that other one, you're already most of the way there for getting Perfect Match anyway. But again, I think it's that problem of like, well, what do you do if you draw that and another end phase in your starting hand? And
Sure.
You get some of those tough questions.
Yeah, I think clearly the biggest challenge with these is the ability to brick, especially there was often in season 1 when you had Superior Tactician, you could draw that early and still be able to score it, because scoring only 6, especially when there was no limit on surges, that you could still work your way through that. If you draw Perfect Match in your opening hand and have to get through 10 of your other 11, and you can only afford to throw away 1, that has the potential to really put the brakes on, and you're going to draw it in that first hand a quarter of the time. I think you need to make sure that everything else in your deck is like real reliable. Like there's nothing that's a reach there. But I like where it sits. I'd be interested to see if they, I feel like there's some design space where they could, have a gambit or something that says, take a objective card from your hand and put it on the bottom of your deck or something like that. Lets you mitigate some of these, but we haven't seen too much about that. So those what are cool about those is that they're very much about your deck design, how you put everything together to make that happen. Phil, how about we throw it right back at you? Give us another.
Well, the other one that I've got here is Sorceress Volley. Again, the spell casting, which I have been playing recently while I was waiting for the new warbands to come out. I was playing Curse Breakers, and Sorceress Volley is another really easy one where I don't know if I'd say really easy because you could just kill your target, but you have to score it after you have made your second or subsequent spell attack in a phase against the same enemy fighter. Now, of course, the risk here is that you just kill them and then you can't score it, which would be, I guess, a shame, but you got to kill. But the nice thing is that you don't have to hit. You could miss both of your attacks and you could still score this. So I think at the early parts of the game, this starts to feel really nice, because if you can position somebody like Stormsire where he can just sort of go turret mode, it's like he's on 1 damage and he's basically just rolling hammers. There's no guarantee you're going to kill anybody or hit anybody, but you can pretty much guarantee that if you can take 2 shots, you've got 1 glory, which I think is strong. I think while Curse Breakers, I think, benefit the most from this spellcasting tech, I think it actually gives any of the other 1 spellcaster warbands a chance at playing spellcasting again, which kind of, I think, will diversify that magic field a little bit.
Sure. I mean, the other warbands would love to see some ability to surge some off of spells. We'll see later that the Curse Breakers have picked up another way to get a second person with a spell attack action. So once again, they potentially benefit more from it than others, although they're kind of spoiled for choice on those. So yeah, Turret Vortimus might really do some work with this. I want to talk about different ways to score for taking fighters out in an unconventional way. There's Unexpected Pitfall, and this feels like the improved Big Brother to Master of Terrain, which was a surge for 1 glory to if somebody got taken out by a lethal. This one is actually a hybrid, and scored immediately after an enemy fighter is taken out of action by a lethal hex, or an enemy fighter is taken out of action by damage dealt by a gambit you played. And a gambit is a spell or any of those chip damage things like lethal ward or collapse or something like that. This feels like it happens a lot, and so I think this one seems real attractive to me. I see it happen in a lot of games, and building a deck the right way, I think this would be super doable. So,
because I think that also goes off of Pit Trap and Snare. Like those are all ploys, gambits that you play. So yeah, no, it's strong.
Yeah, a lot of ways to trigger this, and you see a lot of fighters die with lethals in Beastgrave. So something there.
We're starting to build up the list of hybrids. You got Gathered Momentum, Unexpected Pitfall. Well, it's starting to rise.
Yeah.
Can't hold me back. What else do you got, Geoff?
I've got kind of on a similar vein, Against the Wall. It's a surge. It's for 1 glory. It says score this immediately when an enemy fighter in an edge hex is taken out of action. The reason I like this one is that some ploys that we might talk about later. There's I think it's called Collapse. Is it?
Yep.
Yeah, Collapse, where you pick 3 edge hexes that are touching each other, and everyone in those hexes is dealt 1 damage. The interesting part about this card for me is that it just says when an enemy fighter in an edge hex is taken out of action. So it doesn't say anything about by an attack action. It doesn't say anything about a gambit, a lethal hex. They could even kill themselves with by rolling 2 crits on a spell. So it's got actually a lot more play than other cards, because I look at this and think this is like an aggro card. When you've got Strong Start, if you draw that later, you can't use it. So I'm trying to look for more aggro related cards, and I think this kind of fits into that vein. It's a different way of putting some kill cards in. Distraction. There's now a new distraction. Lots of ways to push people into lethal hexes, scoring Against the Wall, and the one you just mentioned, Unexpected Pitfall. Two surges in one action. So I think that card's interesting. I like the design space.
And I think there's ways that you can, the more you play with it, you can kind of tweak the board state a little bit to help you out. If you're somebody who offsets the boards a lot, if that plays into your play style, you by default increase kind of dramatically the number of edge hexes that exist, especially the ones that get played over as people move in and out of that choke point, but also along the edges of the board, the long edges that are now no longer aligned with another board. So there's more edge hexes there, and you can place an objective. If you have that third one, try and place it up against an edge, and then you can tempt fighters to be in that spot, so you can pick them off when they're standing there and get your Against the Wall score. Yeah,
and Encroaching Shadow, Lethal Ward. Just put a lot of pressure on those edge hexes with Collapse as well. So anyway, I like it.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I can think of just stepping back a bit to the Unexpected Pitfall. Just in our last league game, Kacharik had strayed to the wrong spot, and it was totally unscathed, but I hit him with Lethal Ward, and then he was standing next to a lethal, so I gave him Toxic Gases So he had to either get dragged into it and all the way through it. So he took the damage, and then I distracted him into lethal for the third. So it's a lot of cards. A lot of cards that just take out Kacharik. But that was one of those hands you're like, I feel like unexpected pitfall would be kind of handy right here. Yeah. Anybody got any other objectives they want to hit before we move on to gambits?
I mean, I see that it's on your list, Davey, so I'll let you talk about it if you want. But I think Team Effort is a really interesting card.
Yeah, that's a good point. So Team Effort, specifically, I put it in here because it felt like there's a few cards in this that feel like they may help if you're trying to do that control playstyle. And again, if we differentiate between aggro, hold objective, and control being the sort of defensive standoff and deny glory. And this is a duel. Score 1 glory in the end phase if you have 2 or more surviving friendly fighters, and each surviving friendly fighter made 1 or more actions in the previous phase. That seems extraordinarily easy to get, especially in small warbands, and those small warbands are frequently the ones that are wanting to do that control playstyle. And it's just saying actions, so it's not even activations. So you can trigger this off of Jealous Defense, or even out of activation. So any power card that's giving you an action. Stand and shoot will even do it, that sort of thing. So, yeah. So pretty cool there. And I guess honorable mention, I had Frantic Exchange. This one is a lot harder, but also may play into the control playstyle. Score immediately after a 5th or subsequent power card is played in the same power step. And that's from either player. Now, as the other player sees this happen, they may adapt against it. But frequently with that control playstyle, I'll see a big flurry of cards played at the end because you've saved up a bunch. So worth consideration, but mostly I put it in there because I love the quote is Morgok is saying, "What the Zog is going on?" Just like, and I've had those power steps where you're like, "What? Like, how are we still just I haven't even taken my first activation yet, and I feel like we played an entire round, with enough stuff happening." So, but yeah, speaking of power cards. Who's got a power card they want to talk about? Jeff, you got one that stands out to you?
Yeah. And actually, since we're reading the text here, this one's called Maybe Just a Quick Breather, lads, by Morgok. And it's Unnatural Truce, and it's for drawing up to 2 power cards. Each other player draws up to 1. And the reason I think this card's interesting is I think there are times where you would draw 2 cards, 2 power cards, to give your opponent 1 power card. I think it's interesting design space. I don't know if it goes in every deck, but there's now objectives for having no power cards left. And you put this together with Frenzied Search, and if you're playing the Reavers, they've got a few cards for if they die or you kill something, you draw more cards. So I think there's maybe something here to just draw through your deck as quickly as possible, whether your opponent's drawing a card or not. So I kind of thought Unnatural Truce was an interesting card. It was definitely a breath of fresh air.
That's a good point because it like you said, it can lean basically, so some people pointed out that this is maybe a net 0 because you're giving up 1 card for 2, and then you're the other player. So that's a net +1 card for you, and then your opponent gets a card. So that is a net +1 for them. So in between, you haven't really gained cards in that sense. Although, people were skeptical also about Frenzied Search because of giving up a card and playing a card just to draw 3, and look how popular that is. But I think if you lean into it with the right stuff, like you said, with To the End for playing through all your power cards, or if you're a deck that really wants all your chip damage to come through, yeah, I think you're totally right. I think this is an interesting spot to take a look at.
Yeah, I just think there's some decks that they don't really care about your game plan. They just know that if they pull the cards they need, they win. And whether they're giving cards to you doesn't matter, because if they just find that 1 card. So yeah, it could work.
Sure. Phil, what do you got?
So in ploys, gambits, I guess. I thought that Buried Instinct was a really interesting card. So this one is a reaction where before the attack roll, you can give your friendly fighter a guard token. And if your friendly fighter is also a quarry, they can then re-roll one of the dice in their defense roll. Now, whether the re-roll part is really going to come into play very often, I don't know. And I don't think it really matters all that much. Having the ability to have a tactical guard token, I think, is just really powerful because, one, you're harder to hit and your opponent maybe wasn't expecting it. But I think the bigger part is that it means that you can tactically decide when to make a fighter unable to be driven back. And I think that could mean some miscalculations on your opponent's part, because they might have been like holding on to a distraction or something for some other fighter, thinking that, well, I'll knock this person off and then, I'll take care of some other objective or something. And then all of a sudden that whole plan goes out the window because you had this reaction.
Yeah, definitely.
I think there's so many applications for this that we can't really cover it all here, but I expect to see this card a lot, especially in decks that are playing objectives.
And I can say, having played plenty of aggro, a lot of times you're doing the math on, I'm going to do all this and I'm going to push them. After I do all the damage that I'm going to do, I'm also pushing them into a lethal, and that's going to be the last bit of damage I need. Right. And this, by virtue of being a reaction, like a reaction to deny that drive back, hugely powerful. So I think, I think ghouls, you're going to see a lot of ghosts. Well, I guess they don't care much about the lethals, but even there, they get a substantial defensive boost, and they want to remain standing on their objectives. So, great choice. I think it combos nicely with a card later that we'll talk about, which is a Cryptic Companion. But we'll get back around to that. That's an upgrade. So for a later section. For me, I think I brought up Nightmare in the Shadows, which is basically distraction, right? Like, it's distraction with another name. That's kind of nuts to me now that they reprinted distraction with this one coming along, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, double distraction is really good. We've seen that already. Warbands that had multiple distractions already had a really strong control of the board, and now all those warbands have 3, and if you're banshees, you have 4. I don't know. I'm not sure what the thought there was necessarily.
I'm wondering if you're going to see one of these restricted, like we've seen that in the past with duplicates. So like Longstrider and Burst of Speed, for a while, only one of them was restricted. Great Strength and Incredible Strength in season 1. One of those was restricted. So I don't know if maybe they're planning on something like that we'll see at some point. But
yeah.
Although I think we're in a hold objective meta though, or currently we're in a hold objective meta though, and it's interesting to see them come out with a card. Now they've kind of seen the whole release in advance, like they know what's coming and what's not. But for them to come out with Nightmare in the Shadows now, after kind of this, ghouls have now 3 Grand Clashes in a row?
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting to see a card get released just on the tail end of that, which in theory makes ghouls' life more difficult when there's now 2 ways for you to get pushed off. And if you're an aggro warband, though, having those cards in your deck doesn't hurt you at all. Sure. Pulling somebody closer to you or pushing somebody into a lethal, like they have a lot of play, those cards, and I think it's interesting that they're not maybe helping the best warbands right now, that maybe they're giving a leg up to some of the smaller ones.
That's a really good point. That's fair. So it may be specifically a response to knowing that the objective play is particularly powerful.
Yeah.
Geoff, what do you got?
I've got a card called Lucky Escape. It's a reaction. It says, play this when a friendly fighter is dealt 1 damage precisely. That damage is not dealt to them. Now, I read this, and we'll bring this out to everybody here. Does this also apply to a lethal hex? If I'm pushed into a lethal hex, I'm dealt 1 damage precisely. That damage is not dealt to them.
Yeah.
It should apply.
I saw this and I thought, my goodness. So this means I get Sphere of Akshid. I get dealt 1 damage from ploys. I get pushed into a lethal X. This card to me seems very strong because I can't think of a lot of applications where maybe a control warband doesn't want this, as you mentioned, like knowing the math, being thrown off that one, especially when you throw a guard token on that says you can't be pushed, or you're using Lucky Escape. Reactions are just so strong because you don't need to play them because you can react to them. So I think Lucky Escape might see a lot of play. And the card art is also fantastic. I love the Wolf Riders.
Yeah. Even works against backlash if you're
true.
Like that. I think the one thing that's kind of a question mark is it says play when you are dealt the damage. It's a little bit confusing about how it might interact with certain reaction windows. Dealt 1 damage precisely. So I think it just takes some close reading. You may have to do a little bit of sorting out with your opponent if you think it's occupying the same reaction window as something else.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Let's see. Phil, what else you got?
So another one that I thought was interesting here. I know some other people don't like this spell all that much, but I thought Wild Form was really interesting. So Wild Form's one of the sort of wordier cards here. So I'll try and give a fairly brief synopsis here. But basically, it's a spell that's cast if you roll any doubles in the casting roll. So 2 channel, 2 focus, 2 crit. So if you do happen to cast the spell, the fighter gets +1 damage to their range 1 and 2 attack actions. So this is effectively a gambit that works as great strength. So you can bring an extra great strength. And then depending on which doubles you roll, you get either +1 move, +1 wounds, or +1 defense, with wound or +1 move being the most likely and +1 defense with crits being the least likely. And this then persists until the fighter is taken out of action. So it's effectively an upgrade that you can put in your with your gambits, and it's a passive spell. So again, like Curse Breakers or somebody can cast this, and there's nothing really that you can do about it. They're just casting spells off in a corner. So I thought it was really interesting for that. But then this sort of ability to have a double upgrade as a ploy felt really powerful to me. And although +1 move is maybe not viewed as being that great, I feel like a lot of the spellcasters in the game are kind of slow. So +1 damage and +1 move could suddenly mean that a spellcaster's hitting for 3 or 4 damage in melee at speed 4 or 5. And so all of a sudden they cast a spell and they're coming in to take your head off.
I also think that the real goal of the card is +1 damage, and you get that on any double. So like if you look at that as just the primary focus, I'm taking Stormsire, and on any double, and I've got an innate, on any double I'm getting +1 strength and +1 move. Like I agree with you completely. That is extremely strong. And if I happen to not get my lightnings off and I get two swirls, and I apologize for the big magic people out there that know the names, I can never remember them. Focus maybe. To get +1 wounds, that's good too. Like these are really strong, and it's persistent until the caster is out of action, which is, as you mentioned, essentially an upgrade. But +1 strength is fantastic.
Yeah. We continue to see Curse Breakers spoiled for choice with new cards.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where are they going to find the room? For me, we've mentioned it a couple times, but there is a collapse. And this is a little tricky. I've seen some people confused by the wording, but you have to pick 3 edge hexes that are all adjacent to each other. And all in one person's territory. So your 3 hexes cannot extend into no man's land in between the boards. And then anyone in those 3 that you selected will take damage. So this means that 90% of the time it is a better encroaching shadow, because you can get more than one enemy with it. Every so often, the enemy you want to get you're going to be forced to hurt your own fighter or something like that. Or if the one guy you want to get, it happens to be a no man's land, then you've got a problem. But if you look at a board, especially in the corners, there can be some pretty interesting ways for hexes to line up. Because right in the corner, it's easier to look at a diagram, but if you get one out, you can actually connect 3 hexes together and leave the corner spot available, because the 2 hexes that are adjacent to that corner are also adjacent to each other. So you can have a collapse that somehow doesn't land on the very corner spot. So take a look at a board when you get a chance. If you're going to play around with this, there's some pretty tricksy things you can do with it.
Yeah.
And it's particularly relevant with the Unexpected Pitfall, and then with the Worm Spat, who want to inspire off of multiple people being damaged, multiple enemies being damaged. So worth noting. The only other one I really wanted to mention, I would say, is Leave Nothing to Chance, and this is destroy an objective that you're standing in, basically. A gambit. It's kind of like the Ilthari has that one where she heals the leech power.
Yep.
This just doesn't have the healing. And this is actually a feature token, so if it's already flipped, you can make sure nobody flips it back. So you can destroy it, whether it's an objective or an objective that has been flipped into a lethal, which is handy. And what's important about this is that this, combined with Abyssos Unmaking, maybe makes Scorched Earth relevant again. And if you can score off of that, then that helps you find the room for it, instead of just having it purely as counterplay to objective decks.
Yeah, kind of justifies the space in the deck a little bit more, right?
Mm-hmm. Now I know Amon, the last Adepticon, brought Scorched Earth, and the only card he had to score it was Abyssos Unmaking. So risky play, but here, if you've got two ways of scoring that one gambit, especially one that doesn't require a caster to be alive, that's pretty handy. So worth considering for that reason alone. Who else? Anybody else got a gambit they want to hit before we move on?
I've got Sudden Scarcity. I think it's a card that's interesting because it says that the next time an opponent spends any glory points to give a fighter an upgrade, they must spend 1 additional glory to do so. This effect persists until the end of the phase. I think it's kind of like No Time to me. This seems like a card that you could be really creative with if you knew the right time to play it. Just like No Time, you could really put your opponent in a tough spot. If they only have 1 glory left to spend and you play this card, that means they're maybe not getting a key on, or maybe they're not getting survival instincts. Maybe they're not getting what they want, and if they only have 2 glory, maybe they had plans for the other glory. So I think it's an interesting design space. I'm not saying I'm going to be running it in my deck per se, but I think it's very interesting, and people smarter than me will definitely be able to use it. I just assume that they use No Time, because I've never been able to. I feel like I should be smart enough to use it, but I can't seem to pull it off. But Sudden Scarcity kind of reminds me. It gives me that same vibe. So I think that's a creative card.
And it really sticks it to Godsworn, which we all want to see that.
Oh, you wanted to inspire?
Yeah. Well, and then I can also see, if you were really going control, you combo this with Daylight Robbery. I'm gonna steal glory. I'm gonna steal glory, and your next objective is going to be expensive. So take that. Yeah, good call. Anybody got anything else, or should we move on to upgrades?
I'm good for upgrades.
Yeah, same.
All right. Well, Geoff, give us one.
Yeah, I think everybody saw this and cringed a little bit inside, even Cursebreaker players. But is it Jared's Spirited Sphere? It's a lost page, which we'll talk about later, about how those pages have been getting collected lately. It is a ranged upgrade that is on focus. It does 1 damage, range 3. It has Ensnare, so it's very similar to. Maybe give me a reminder on it. What's the 3 range with the Ensnare currently? That's not.
The spheres. What's it called?
No, I think you're thinking of the Seeking Stones.
Yes. Thank you very much. Seeking Stones. Yeah. So like Seeking Stones was already getting a bit of play with ghouls and ghosts, just as a way to try to get through some of that damage. So this card gives a ranged attack to one of Stormsire's buddies, It has ensnare, range 3, restricted to casters, and it just gives them more ways that they can just continue to get more reach on their spells in those spell heavy decks. So I think this is almost just made for curse breakers, and I am really, really scared of where they're going next.
Yeah. I played against one of those today and took out Stormsire. I was like, okay, everything's fine. And then a arcane savant Rastus threw this guy on and then kept blasting, which was very disappointing.
For what it's worth, I don't think anybody did it, but the Seeking Stones with Hand of Sigmar and what's the reaction to deal an extra damage upgrade that they have?
Lightning Whip.
Whip, yes.
You put those all on there together, and suddenly you have almost guaranteed range 3 attacks that do 2 damage.
What's scary is you can put Lightning Whip on this. You can put Lightning Whip on this attack.
Well,
and that would ensnare you.
It's just not as accurate. But it's still good.
That would do 2 damage. Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful and horrible at the same time.
Yeah, you wouldn't have the Hand of Sigmar helping, but I see what you're saying. Imagine a Curse Breakers that are sitting with Jared's Spirited Sphere. You've got Stormsire, and then you got Seeking Stones, the other one, and they're just saying, "I don't care that I got 3 move. I'm just gonna throw things at you."
Yeah.
Phil, what have you got?
So there's a couple that I think we definitely have to talk about because of how strong they are, but I'd like to talk about some of these maybe less obvious choices first. I think one that is going to be low key really good is Substance Siphon. For people who overlooked this one, Curse Breakers are going to love it again. Substance Siphon is that it changes your defense to dodge, but you get a number of dice equal to the current turn round, and your defense then cannot be modified or re-rolled. And so, well, that can mean that anybody at 3 dodge is pretty scary in an end phase, because if they're on guard, not an end phase, round 3, because they'd be 3 dodge, but they'd also be getting blocks to work with that. The Curse Breaker, Amos and Rastus, when they're inspired, they're already counting blocks as successes all the time. So it's like, so they're just on 2 or 3 dice once they're past round 1 that are counting blocks and dodges as successes all the time. Which, I don't know, seems pretty good.
Seems good, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
For me, let's see. Well, actually, you got another spell one on here. Talk to me about your other spell ones here while we're on there.
Yeah. So this other spell one, I think I really like it, but there's lots of controversy about how this would work. So this is Quintox Combative Cantrip. From my reading, I think you can just cast this as many times as you want because there's no targeting restriction. But some people are reading it to say that if there's no enemy fighter adjacent, because you can't push the enemy fighter, there'd be nothing you could do. So this is a cast on a single focus where after you cast it, you push one adjacent enemy fighter up to 1 hex. Then you put the caster on guard, and then you push the caster 1 hex. Now, to my understanding, spells that say choose a whoever when you cast the spell, those have to have a target to be able to be cast. But any other spell that doesn't specify that you have to target anybody, just go off, and then you just complete any of the criteria that you can.
Yeah, I'm not knowledgeable enough to say either way, but
and I believe that ruling came up in the FAQs previously with spell casting stuff when turtle casting became very popular for a little while. So it's probably going to need to be FAQ'd, but as far as I understand it, you should just be able to cast this spell sort of forever as a free push and guard token for the caster every time you cast it, which to me seems really great because you would potentially want to just put your fighter on guard as an action anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And this way you get a spell cast, a guard token, and a push.
So a nice one for the standoff curse breakers.
And this is also a lost page. So if you're going to go lost page build, it gives you another option to stack that glory as well.
Well, talk to us about lost pages, Geoff. We've covered a couple already.
Yeah. Well, it's time to figure out, or now it's time to reveal what is the point of all these lost pages. And we now know that there is a scattered tome that has been losing all these pages. It says if this fighter is surviving at the end of the third action phase, gain 1 glory point for each lost page upgrade this fighter has, restricted to casters. So this upgrade is reminiscent of some of the Cataphrane relic upgrades. It's I could see this probably being the go-to now that Tomes Mollog and Tomes builds and Cataphrane relic tome or decks are kind of maybe falling off a little bit. I see this being the next one that they're going to have to try to keep a lid on a little bit, because I could see this getting out of control. All the lost page cards seem good, unlike the tomes where there's a few of them where you would never use one to maybe do a damage to an adjacent as an action. So I'm a little worried. I shouldn't say I'm worried. I'm excited for the builds that this could have, but I'm a little worried about how far it could go.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if this one got some of the Lady Heroes players looking at Arcane Siphon for breaking upgrades.
Probably.
Yeah.
I would have to think so.
If it comes strong into the meta, it might raise the value of that card for sure.
Yeah,
because this one doesn't take an objective card to trigger it. It is just potentially a 3 to 4 glory upgrade that just requires being alive, which, as we've seen before, curse breakers are pretty good at.
And a number of the little scattered pages help with that, like Phil was talking about with Quintox cantrip. You can be putting yourself on guard, pushing yourself to a safe spot. There's Iara's instant shield for rerolling your defense.
That card is so ridiculous. If it just goes off all the time, then suddenly Stormsire is like, well, you can't touch this.
I wonder if there's a Facula build into that.
I bet there is.
That. Yeah. All right.
I actually have an idea with that with Substance Siphon.
Oh. Tasty. Well, let's see. I've got one talking about completing things. We're not complete on this yet. We just did see Mandibles of the Grub. So we've seen the Sting, we've seen the Mandibles. We're still waiting on something else. Mandibles gets you there with gives Ensnare. It gives heal 1 to range 1 attack actions, and it eventually will lead into the Avatar of the Grub upgrade. Once you get all 3, and their Ensnare becomes on your range 1 or 2. Heal. Their heal will be on your heal 1 on your 1 or 2 range 1 or 2 attack actions. That's pretty nice on a big guy if you can get there. I just like it. Seeing, I don't know if anyone's gonna have the deck or the build for this, but it'd be fun to see an Grub guy chomping around in there. So
yeah, it's so hard to imagine this working, but if you could make it work where Mollog can kind of just spin and hit multiple fighters, where even if he just connects once, he gets healed, like that's probably pretty solid. But it feels like it'd be really hard to pull off. So I don't know.
Sure.
I'm also not too sure how many of these cards they're gonna be. Like if there's only 3,
there
and that's what
3.
makes the Avatar. Well, no, I know there's gonna be minimum 3, but I'm wondering if there'll be more. So what it says is, the way this all works is if this fighter is 3 or more Grub aspects, remove those cards from the game. They do not go directly into a discard pile. And give the Avatar of Grub upgrade to this fighter. So, and then as you mentioned earlier, he's got a whole bunch of powers. The thing that I'm wondering is if there's enough of them, it makes sense. Like Skaven would love to keep bringing back somebody as they start to work their way to become an Avatar.
Yeah.
But if there's only 3, that would, or 3, maybe even 4, that's maybe tough to build a deck around. A lot of their fighters have range 1, so there's definitely a lot of synergy there. But yeah, I really hope this is a thing. If there's any clues in the Avatar card, because everything so far that's been on the Avatar card has been one of the cards, we're still waiting to see some reactions and some other items that would build it all together.
Yeah, let's stack it up on the Sepulchral Guard champion. Give him 3 dice cleave and snare and +1 damage. Heals whatever, but yeah. Or I guess even on the Harvester. Yeah, a lot of interesting things there. And you raise a great point about getting on somebody who can be brought back again and again. My other one, talking about fighter upgrades, is the Amberbone Spear, and this is one I've been waiting for a while. The drop of this might be enough to. It's got me actually spent some time today putting together a Reaver's deck again, because I really wanted this. Wanted to see what this was. So this is. In case you don't know, it's range 2, hits on 2 hammers, does 2 damage, and if you take somebody out of action, you discard the card and get an extra glory point on top of above and beyond the kill. And what's nice about the 2 is that it has some it increases your range as far as what your threat range is. It's much easier to trap somebody. You can position to do that, which is a big accuracy boost. And then specifically in Reavers, if you're a little saucy, you can take Fueled by Slaughter, which is kill somebody and make another attack, and that is something that benefits a lot from having some extra range 2 attacks in the warband. So
yeah, and I think we kind of assumed this was coming, and knowing from Nullstone and the Shade Glass weapons that, I mean, the spears were pretty much the best versions of those ones as well. Sword, you could argue, is potentially better in certain situations because it's more accurate. But
yeah, have we seen an Amberbone sword? Is that still?
We haven't seen it
possible?
Yet. But if we assume that the weapons are a full set, just like they were with Nullstone and Shade Glass, then I think we probably will.
Okay.
But no, we haven't seen it yet. The dagger is the one that is also coming out with these, which it's okay.
Yeah, 3 swords, cleave on a crit. Cleave on a crit is a pretty modest upgrade. It's more useful for if you're somebody who's trying to have extra ways to score what armor, I think, than it is to actually if you're already critting, a lot of times the cleave is irrelevant. Not always, but often.
Yeah, and in season 2, the dagger was, I think, one of the most powerful ones, because on a crit it would do 4 damage.
Season 1, right? The Shade Glass dagger.
Yeah, right, Shade Glass dagger. So I it's interesting that the dagger doesn't continue to be strong. I'm glad they're kind of mixing around the weapon profiles.
Yeah. Well, I think they decided that both the hammer and the dagger from Shade Glass were too strong. They changed
the hammer. You're right.
How both of those worked, and they were both restricted, I believe, in the first bar.
They were. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think they learned their lesson there, but unfortunately that does mean that we don't really see those ones get used.
Yeah. But I think Amberbone Spear gets into the area that I would think about including it. I'd been including Amberbone Axe just on the off chance that throwing it, which wouldn't get you extra glory, but would give you the extra range you needed to make that last charge or whatever. But this is that nice sort of in between. Geoff, you've got another attack action upgrade in your selections. Why don't you throw that at us?
Yeah, absolutely. It's called Finishing Blow. The reason I picked this one is just because of some of the card interactions that I think are coming. It says reaction after this fighter's successful attack action with combo, which we haven't seen a lot of yet. Make this attack action. It must target the same fighter plus 2 damage to this attack action when it's made in this way. And the profile on this is range 1, 2 hammers, already 2 damage. So I don't think we've fully seen combo yet. Nope. And I don't know if Daughters of Cain is what's going to really bring that out. But if they have an innate combo on their card or that trigger word, you equip this and they attack once, combo, now get to attack with the finishing blow for 4 damage. That is just wild. So I don't actually know what this card is going to be used for because we haven't seen a lot of combo, but anytime I see 4 damage, it's a scary thing.
Yeah. I'm going to say Hrothgorn just puckered up a little bit.
Moloch too, yeah.
Yeah. And then these, if we get some builds that use combo, then some of those sort of universal bumps. So if you've got it on a lighter fighter, challenge seeker, you get an extra dice on your initial and your combination. Great strength, effectively a potential extra 2 damage in that one activation from the first and then second attack. So
very true.
Yeah. I think the only downside to these, and that's just combo in general, is that the only way you get the combo reaction is if your first attack was already successful. So it is going to need to be something that's quite accurate. So I think right now that's maybe the hang up, but if you can find a way to just get the volume of attacks, it could be devastating. Sure. I know I've seen some people are floating around ideas of doing Skaven with combo
with Black
stuff.
Hunger. Black Hunger specifically, because you can
God, that sounds
swing horrifying. 3 times and then combo off of any of those. That's nuts.
I could see Sepulchral Guard actually taking advantage of this too. Just because you have the time, you can build up fighters, and if they go out of action, you just bring them back and they can keep swinging.
Yeah, and I think the Wolf Riders have really shown it, and it's a Wolf Rider that's on this art, but the Wolf Riders have really shown that having 2 attacks per activation is strong. So if combo can be anything like that, I know it says it has to be successful, but if they can pull that off, that's going to be really strong. The only issue I see on this card is it says must attack the same fighter. So in theory, something would have to be pretty big for you to have a successful attack for even 1 damage and then swing in for 4 damage more. I'm not. It's an interesting card. I don't fully understand combo mechanics yet, but it's coming for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a good call with you thinking maybe one of our last 2 remaining warbands for the season having innate combo. I think we tend to see every new rule is featured in some warband somewhere, and we haven't seen combo innately yet. So,
do you think poison then is going to be a feature for somebody?
Oh, sure.
Ooh, be interesting.
Yeah, background wise, that could be a. I think K-Knights have had assassins and stuff. At least in the world it was in the old world.
Yeah.
I'm not as up to speed on the AOS version. But anybody got any other upgrades we want to hit?
Well, I think the elephant in the room is our cryptic companion for this journey through Beastgrave. This one was on your list, Davey. So if you'd like to discuss this one, I think it's worth mentioning.
So this is a upgrade. It will turn you into a quarry, and if the fighter who this upgrade is applied to is holding an objective in an end phase, you get +1 glory, which is nuts because that is something that existed for 3rd end phase with the formless key. I want to say.
Yep.
And that was already seeing some play. If you can do it and get glory at a time where it will do you some good, oof. So, and this is a big boon to hold objective decks. Hand it off to, I don't know, Valerie, who's standing in the back, just picking her nose and sitting on an objective, and all of a sudden she's getting more.
Yeah,
potentially 3 glory over a game. Like she'll get a supremacy's worth if you can keep her safe back there.
Yeah.
And there was Tomb of Glories before, but that took an activation and a charge token, and this seems like a much easier way to do it.
Well, there's no reason you can't do both.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Porque no los dos, as they say.
Yeah. I am shocked that this is a card that would come out. Some people are saying, oh, well, you can just push somebody off or whatever. But how many times have you ended up getting into an end phase and you don't have any push cards left, and somebody puts out a key and you're like, dang it, they're going to score that 1 or 2 extra glory they need to win this game because of that key upgrade. And that's just in one end phase. This is all of them. To put it in perspective, like most of the time, and I think maybe we lose sight of the math here, but it's like most upgrades we view as like worth 1 glory. So if this even scores you 1 glory, it's done its job. So anything on top of that is just gravy. So it's like, what? Yeah. Like what?
send Allenson to the glory mines there. Take his buddy. He just has a book club in the corner. He's got his companion and he's reading his book.
Well, and like, I mean, there's so many applications for this with, I mean, obviously with hold objectives, but even just for control decks where it's like, I'm going to have one fighter that I can sort of guarantee can stay on this objective.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll just have a way to sit in a corner and generate glory for me.
I mean, I guess we joked about comboing it with Tome of Glories, but let's say the first upgrade you get out is Tome of Glories, then you read that, which gives you another glory, which you then can spend on Companion, and you've had one glory kind of be the seed for a real,
right.
Steady flow of further glory.
Yeah. So
you would need to apply this though before the end phase.
That's true.
You would.
Upgrades. Yeah, I just was thinking about that, about how you could get this out sneakily, but I don't think you can. I think you got to put this out so that somebody can use the Nightmare in the Shadows, is it? To try the second push, try to get them off. But I mean, Nightmare in the Shadows. That was it.
Yeah.
Block it. Yeah.
I think the other thing that maybe is not immediately obvious with this is that in hold objective decks, it starts to pull people in multiple directions for how you deny objectives. Because if you got, say, one person with Tome of Glories and one person with Cryptic Companion and another person who's just sitting on an objective, and it's like, I lose pretty much no matter what I do here. I have to get somebody off because they're holding 3. I need to stop supremacy or whatever. But if I pick the wrong one, then all of a sudden it gives you a situation where there's no right choice, and that's always a horrible state to be in as an opponent. And well, I think that's fine in general. I think that most games need that to be able to have control of game state. To put it on like the strongest version of decks it currently in the meta is strange.
Sure.
It's a little now, of course, maybe, they didn't necessarily know to what extent hold objective play was going to affect the meta. I'm sure that they meant to make it stronger because it was basically non-existent before Beastgrave. So despite all the complaining, it's kind of like, well, this is sort of what we asked for, isn't it?
Sure.
But yeah, so it's sort of like, oh man, this embarrassment of riches for people who are playing hold objectives, which I think goes back to the point that Geoff made of like, well, Nightmare has to be there, right? It's the release valve.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. Well, I think that's a pretty broad look. I'm glad we didn't try to hit every card because we'd be here for a while. But anybody got anything else they want to hit before we wrap it up?
No. I'm just really excited for these cards. I know we kind of tore into some of them saying, these are outliers for maybe being problems, but I think I have full faith in the GW community team, or sorry, the Underworld's community team to kind of pick it. I'm sure they've already got their eye on some of them. The cards need to come out first. They're not going to put out a restricted list before the cards even come out. They're going to come out. They're going to let people play them for a week or two, and then they'll make whatever balancing decisions they have to. And I could see Scattered Tome ending up on there. I could see, some of these other ones ending up on there. So I'm not too worried. I think the game is going to continue to be healthy, and there just might need to be some tweaks along the way.
Yeah, we can't really look at these in isolation because these came along with 2 new warbands, and we really just don't know yet what the impact of Hrothgorn and the Man Trappers, and to maybe a lesser extent the Wormspat. We'll see with them. How are they going to warp the meta in different ways?
Sure.
So it's an exciting time to be playing the game.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's going to do it for us tonight. You can get in touch with us at WTHcast on Twitter or whatthehexcast@gmail.com. I want to say thanks for people who comment or reach out. It's always fun to chat with you. You can find Geoff bopping around the Facebook groups. I think is that usually the best way for them to
Yeah, always in the shadows, always watching, sometimes commenting.
you're the cryptic companion to Mortal Realms. We get glory just by you hanging out with us. So.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're always glad to have you on. So behind the scenes, we've been doing you and I were doing a little brainstorming today on Fecula and the worm spat. So see if we can come up with something. I think you made much better progress than I did. I was feeling pretty good about what I'd put together. Then you sent a link, and I was like, ooh, I think I'm just going to take that instead.
There's something there. There's something there if you can feel it.
Yeah. We have a couple moving pieces as far as what our next episode will be, but just a little glimpse into the future here. Some of the things we got coming up. We're still working on a Gits episode. We'd like to do a worm spat deep dive. We may be looking at an episode on alternate play styles. We'd love to get a Reavers episode out, as well as all the lead up to and follow up from Adepticon. So those are some of the things you can be looking forward to in future episodes. As we get them in line. If there's something you particularly want to hear about, we're always also happy to take recommendations, and we'll go from there. Your recommended listening for this episode is Universal Sound by Tyler Childers, an excellent track. I recommend you listen to it, and we'll throw it up on a link on the show notes. But that's going to do it. So Geoff, one more time, thank you. And for What the Hex, I've been Davey.
This is Phil.
This is Geoff.
There's a veteran guest. He knows right where he comes in.
Yeah, so. Jumped right in there. I knew it. I could feel it.
All right.
Well, I don't know them well enough yet to read the name without having to go to another page anyway. So I thought I'm just going to right click and say copy, and then I'm just right click in here and say paste. So it kind of worked out well.
I don't know them well enough either, and that didn't stop me.